Ladies and gentlemen, romantic love has been glorified for centuries in stories, songs, and films. We are taught to believe that it is the highest form of happiness, the ultimate goal of life, and the one experience that can complete us. Yet when we look honestly at human relationships, we find that romantic love, more often than not, leads to disillusionment. Today, let us explore why this happens. Not to dismiss love, but to understand it in a deeper, more educational way. Here are 4 key reasons why romantic love often ends in disappointment. Love is based on projections, not reality. When we fall in love, we rarely see the other person clearly. Instead, we project our hopes, dreams, and ideals onto them. We imagine them to be perfect, the solution to our problems, the answer to our loneliness. But as time passes, reality emerges. We begin to see flaws, differences, and limitations. The image we fell in love with was not the person themselves, but our own projection. Naturally, when that illusion fades, disappointment takes its place. Unrealistic expectations create unavoidable frustration. Society teaches us that one person should meet all our needs, be our best friend, lover, confidant, therapist, and life partner. No single human being can live up to such expectations. When we demand too much from love, we set ourselves up for frustration. The disappointment is not always in the other person, it is in the impossible standards we carry into the relationship. Desire fades as familiarity grows. In the beginning, love feels exciting because it is unknown. Mystery, novelty, and passion fuel desire. But over time, familiarity sets in. What was once thrilling becomes routine. The very brain chemistry that created the high of falling in love cannot last forever. This fading of desire often leaves people feeling let down, wondering if love itself was a lie. In truth, it was never a lie. It was simply a temporary state of the mind and body. Love promises permanence in a changing world. Perhaps the greatest source of disappointment is our belief that love will last forever. But everything in life is impermanent. People change, circumstances evolve, and feelings shift. To demand eternal passion and unchanging affection is to fight against the laws of nature. Disappointment arises not because love ends, but because we expected it to remain untouched by time. Ladies and gentlemen, romantic love does not fail us. Our illusions about it do. The challenge, therefore, is not to abandon love, but to approach it with wisdom. Instead of seeking perfection, we must accept imperfection. Instead of demanding permanence, we must embrace change. And instead of expecting another person to complete us, we must learn to find wholeness within ourselves. Only then can love be experienced, not as disappointment, but as a profound teacher, one that shows us who we truly are, and what it really means to connect with another human being. When people first fall in love, what they are experiencing is rarely the reality of the other person. Instead, it is a projection of their own longings, hopes, and ideals. The human mind has a natural tendency to create images, to fill in the gaps with imagination, and to overlay the world with meaning that suits its own desires. This is particularly strong when it comes to romantic attraction. In the beginning, we are drawn to someone not only for who they are, but for who we believe they could be for us. We see them through the lens of our needs, our dreams, and our fantasies, and in doing so, we often fail to see them clearly. Imagine meeting someone who seems to reflect everything you ever wanted. The way they smile, the way they listen, the way they make you feel special. It seems like fate itself has brought them into your life. But what you are responding to is not just their qualities, it is the meaning you attach to those qualities. If you have longed for affection, you interpret their kindness as the perfect remedy for your loneliness. If you have desired excitement, you interpret their energy as the adventure you were waiting for. If you have yearned for stability, you interpret their calmness as the anchor you always needed. In reality, these traits are only fragments of a complex human being, but under the spell of projection, they appear as perfection itself. The danger of projection is that it creates an illusion, and illusions cannot last. Over time, As daily life unfolds and the initial intensity fades, we start to see the person more fully. Small flaws that once seemed charming begin to irritate us. Habits we once ignored start to stand out. The qualities that once dazzled us may even begin to feel like weaknesses. This is not because the person has suddenly changed, but because our projection has started to dissolve. The curtain of fantasy is lifting, and behind it stands a human being, imperfect, limited, and real. This shift can feel like betrayal, but in truth, it is simply reality reasserting itself. We may feel disappointed, and even resentful, but what has really let us down is not the other person, it is our own illusion of them. We fell in love with a dream, and when the dream vanished, we struggled to accept the person as they truly are. It is like mistaking a shadow for the real object. Once the light shifts and the shadow disappears, we are left with something we may not recognize. Psychologists often describe projection as a mirror. We unconsciously take parts of ourselves, our desires, our unmet needs, our fantasies, and place them onto someone else. We fall in love not so much with who they are, but with who we imagine them to be, a character created out of our own inner world. For instance, someone who feels insecure might project the image of a strong, confident savior onto their partner. Someone who longs for unconditional acceptance might project the role of a nurturing figure. These projections make the other person feel larger than life, as if they are the answer to all our hidden longings. But inevitably, the real person cannot live up to this exaggerated image. They will falter, they will reveal their humanity, and the mirror of projection will crack. The tragedy of projection is that it sets up a cycle of disappointment. In the beginning, it fuels the intoxicating high of romantic love. The world feels brighter, everything seems possible, and we walk in a haze of euphoria. But when reality intrudes, the very thing that gave us such bliss now becomes the cause of our frustration. We may even accuse the other person of having changed, or of no longer being who they once were, when in fact they were never that idealized version to begin with. They were always themselves. It was our perception that was distorted. This does not mean love is fake or meaningless, but it does mean that the love we feel at first is often love for our own creation. True love begins when the projection ends. Only when we can see the other person, without the filter of fantasy, can we begin to relate to them as they truly are. But this requires a level of maturity and self-awareness that many people struggle to reach. It requires us to take responsibility for our own inner voids, rather than expecting another person to fill them. It requires us to acknowledge that no one is perfect, and that the beauty of love lies not in illusions, but in embracing imperfection. The disappointment we feel when projection fades is not a sign that love has failed, rather it is a signal that we are being invited into a deeper stage of connection. The initial infatuation is like a doorway, drawing us in with its brilliance. But beyond that doorway lies the reality of two complex human beings, trying to share a life together. If we cling to the projection, we will always be disappointed, because no human can live up to a fantasy. But if we let go of the illusion, and allow ourselves to see clearly, we may discover a different kind of love, less dramatic, less euphoric, but far more genuine. To understand this is to understand why romantic love often feels like it ends in disappointment. It is not because love itself is flawed, but because we confuse fantasy with reality. We are not betrayed by the other person, we are betrayed by our own expectation. And in recognizing this, we have the chance to grow, to shift from illusion to truth, and to learn that real love begins where projection ends. Human beings often walk into relationships with a set of silent expectations, and these expectations are shaped by stories we are told since childhood. From fairy tales to modern movies, we are taught to believe that when the right person arrives, they will meet every one of our needs. They will be our soulmate, our best friend, our protector, our confidant, and our partner in every aspect of life. They will never let us feel lonely, never misunderstand us, and never fail to make us happy. This narrative is deeply embedded in culture, and it sets us up for a painful collision with reality. No matter how wonderful another person may be, no human being can live up to such all-encompassing expectations. Think about the weight this puts on a relationship. To expect one person to fulfill roles that traditionally were spread out across an entire community, mentor, friend, advisor, caregiver, entertainer, therapist, and lover, is to put them under constant pressure. It is as though we ask them to be 100 people in one. At first, when the fire of passion is strong, it might feel as if these expectations are being met. The partner seems to listen perfectly, understand every unspoken word, and anticipate every need. But as life settles and normalcy returns, cracks begin to appear. The very same partner who once seemed to read our thoughts may now seem distracted. The person who once showered us with affection may now be preoccupied with work, personal struggles, or simply the realities of daily life. When this happens, disappointment arises, not because the partner has suddenly become inadequate, but because our expectations were unrealistic from the beginning. This pattern can be seen clearly in how people often enter relationships, seeking a kind of emotional rescue. Someone who feels lonely expects their partner to constantly provide companionship. Someone who feels insecure expects their partner to endlessly reassure them. Someone who feels unfulfilled expects their partner to provide purpose and meaning. These are heavy demands, and though love can certainly ease loneliness, build confidence, and add richness to life, it cannot erase every insecurity or provide unending validation. The disappointment comes when we realize that love is not a magical cure-all. It is a human bond, not a supernatural solution. Another aspect of unrealistic expectations is the belief in perpetual harmony. Many people imagine that true love means never fighting, never disagreeing, and never feeling distant. So when inevitable conflicts arise, they interpret them as a sign that something is wrong with the relationship, or that they chose the wrong person. But conflict is a natural part of intimacy. Two people cannot share a life without differences surfacing. The expectation that love should mean constant bliss creates frustration because it denies the reality of human interaction. We begin to chase an impossible ideal, and in doing so, miss the value of working through challenges together. It is also worth noticing how society reinforces these expectations by romanticizing permanence and intensity. We are told that passion should remain at its peak forever, that our partner should always be our top priority, and that the relationship should never feel ordinary. Yet all human experiences are subject to change. Passion ebbs and flows, priorities shift, and daily life inevitably becomes routine. If we expect romance to feel like the first weeks of infatuation forever, we are bound to be disillusioned. The truth is, relationships are not designed to remain in a state of heightened excitement. They are meant to evolve into something deeper, steadier, and more sustainable. The disappointment comes when we mistake natural change for failure. Unrealistic expectations also breed resentment. When we expect too much, we often fail to appreciate what is being given. A partner who provides companionship, loyalty, and care may still feel inadequate in our eyes, because they do not provide constant entertainment or endless validation. In focusing on what is missing, we overlook what is present. Over time, this dynamic erodes gratitude and fosters dissatisfaction. We compare our real partner to the fantasy partner we imagined, and the real one always falls short. The educational lesson here is simple yet difficult to accept. Disappointment is not always a result of love failing, but of us asking love to do what it cannot do. We must learn to see relationships as a partnership between two imperfect people, not as a guaranteed source of endless happiness. By recognizing the limits of what another person can provide, we free ourselves from disappointment and allow love to flourish within realistic boundaries. A partner can walk beside us, support us, and share life's joys and struggles, but they cannot erase our inner voids, resolve all our problems, or carry the full burden of our happiness. Those responsibilities remain our own. When we reduce expectations to what is humanly possible, relationships become lighter, freer, and healthier. Instead of demanding perfection, we learn to appreciate presence. Instead of expecting endless novelty, we learn to value stability. Instead of resenting imperfection, we learn to embrace it as part of what makes love real. The disappointment fades not because our partner has changed, but because we have learned to see them clearly, without the heavy burden of impossible expectations. This shift in perspective is not just beneficial for love, it is essential for it. Without adjusting expectations, relationships collapse under their own weight. With realistic expectations, however, love has space to grow into something sustainable. It may not match the fantasy we were sold, but it will offer something more genuine. Companionship, rooted in acceptance, affection grounded in reality, and a bond that is not weakened by illusion, but strengthened by truth. At the beginning of a romantic relationship, there is a unique spark that feels almost otherworldly. The thrill of getting to know someone new, the mystery of discovering their likes, dislikes, and hidden layers, and the anticipation of what may unfold, all of these elements ignite desire in powerful ways. In this stage, every gesture feels meaningful, every touch electric, and every conversation full of possibility. The novelty itself creates an intoxicating high, and many mistake this stage for the definition of love itself. But as time passes and the mystery begins to fade, the excitement that once seemed unstoppable gradually softens. What was once thrilling becomes familiar, and familiarity has a way of cooling the flames of desire. This shift is not a failure of love, but a natural process rooted in human psychology and biology. Neuroscientists have found that the brain responds to novelty with heightened activity in the reward system, releasing chemicals like dopamine that create feelings of pleasure and excitement. This is why the early days of love feel so euphoric. It is literally a chemical rush. However, the brain cannot sustain this level of stimulation forever. As the relationship becomes more predictable, the same person who once triggered an intense surge of emotion now becomes part of daily life. The dopamine highs begin to level out, and what once felt extraordinary becomes ordinary. For many people, this shift feels like a loss, and they interpret it as the fading of love itself. The disappointment comes when we cling to the belief that true love must always feel like those first weeks or months of passion. We imagine that if we have chosen the right person, the intensity should last forever. But this expectation collides with reality, because no matter how perfect a partner may seem, the human mind adapts. What was once new eventually becomes routine, and routine, while comforting, does not produce the same spark as novelty. This is why couples often find themselves reminiscing about the early days, wondering where the passion went, and questioning whether they are still in love. It is important to understand that the fading of desire does not necessarily mean the absence of love. In fact, it often marks a transition from infatuation to a deeper, more stable form of connection. The early stages are fueled by projection and novelty, but lasting love requires something different: acceptance, patience, and commitment. The disappointment arises when people expect the thrill of infatuation to remain constant and interpret its natural decline as a sign that something is wrong. In truth, nothing may be wrong at all. The relationship is simply evolving. However, many individuals struggle with this transition and chase the high of newness instead of embracing the growth of stability. This is why some people move from one relationship to another, always in search of that initial rush. They mistake the fading of desire for the end of love, not realizing that love changes form over time. The desire for novelty is part of human nature, but if it is not understood, it can sabotage relations. When the thrill fades, instead of learning how to build intimacy on new foundations, people often feel disappointed, restless, or even trapped. The cycle of desire and familiarity also reveals something about the human condition. We are drawn to what we do not fully possess. As long as there is mystery, uncertainty, or distance, desire remains strong. Once something becomes fully known, the intensity decreases. In relationships, this dynamic plays out when partners who once longed for closeness now feel dulled by predictability. The paradox is that we crave both stability and excitement, But stability reduces mystery, and without mystery, excitement wanes. This tension is not evidence that love has failed. It is evidence that love exists within the contradictions of human need. The educational insight here is that disappointment often arises not from the relationship itself, but from our misunderstanding of how desire works. We treat the fading of passion as a flaw when it is actually a natural state. If we adjust our perspective, we can begin to see this transition not as an ending, but as an invitation. It invites us to move beyond surface-level attraction into deeper intimacy, where connection is no longer based on novelty but on shared growth, trust, and genuine understanding. There is also a cultural element at play. Movies, books, and songs emphasize the excitement of falling in love, but rarely portray what happens afterward. We are conditioned to believe that passion should last indefinitely, and when reality fails to live up to this fantasy, we feel cheated. In truth, the fading of intensity is not the end of love, but the beginning of something richer, if we allow it. Relationships that survive this stage often find new forms of closeness, laughter in daily routines, comfort in silence, or strength in overcoming challenges together. But to reach this point, we must let go of the illusion that love should always feel like a storm of passion. This does not mean passion disappears forever. In fact, couples who understand this dynamic often find ways to reignite desire by reintroducing novelty, adventure, and growth into the relationship. Traveling together, learning something new, or even spending time apart can rekindle sparks, because they disrupt routine and bring back a sense of mystery. The key is not to expect passion to sustain itself automatically, but to recognize that it requires intentional effort and creativity. Ultimately, the disappointment many feel when desire fades is a misunderstanding of love's nature. Love is not meant to remain frozen in its earliest stage. It is meant to evolve, to deepen, and to transform. The fading of infatuation is not a sign that love has died, but that it is maturing. To resist this truth is to remain trapped in cycles of longing and dissatisfaction. To accept it is to open the door to a more enduring, authentic form of connection, one that is less about the thrill of novelty and more about the strength of shared love. One of the deepest reasons romantic love often ends in disappointment is that it promises something it cannot deliver: permanence. Human beings are naturally drawn to what feels secure and lasting. When we fall in love, the intensity of the experience convinces us that it should never fade. We tell ourselves this is forever, that the feelings of passion, closeness, and joy will remain exactly as they are for the rest of our lives. In that moment, the promise feels believable, even undeniable. Yet life itself is a constant flow of change, and love, being part of life, cannot escape this truth. Every relationship begins in a particular context, two people at specific stages of their lives, with certain dreams, fears, and circumstances. But over the years, those individuals inevitably evolve. People gain new perspectives, encounter unexpected challenges, and grow in ways they themselves could not have predicted. The person you fell in love with 5 or 10 years ago is not the same person who stands before you today, and the same is true for you. This evolution is natural, but when we cling to the expectation that love must remain fixed and unchanging, we feel disappointed. We mistake growth and transformation for failure, because we wanted permanence where only change is possible. This desire for permanence is reinforced by cultural narratives that celebrate happily ever after. Stories rarely show what happens after the wedding, after the honeymoon, or after the first passionate years. Instead, they leave us with the illusion that love, once found, will always look and feel the same. When reality departs from this script, as it inevitably does, we feel betrayed, not by love itself but by the story we believed. We begin to think something has gone wrong, when in fact, the only thing that has happened is that life has moved forward. The impermanence of love is also tied to the impermanence of emotions themselves. No feeling, no matter how intense, can remain constant. Joy fades into contentment, excitement softens into calm, and passion transforms into familiarity. To expect one emotional state to last forever is to demand the impossible. This is why people often say, "You don't love me like you used to." What they really mean is the form of love has changed, and I wanted it to stay the same. But the truth is that love does not disappear, it simply shifts into new expressions. What once manifested as fire may now manifest as warmth. What once felt like a storm may now feel like steady rain. The disappointment arises only if we refuse to see the beauty in these new forms. Another layer to this expectation of permanence comes from the human fear of loss. Love feels so profound that we want to freeze it, to protect it from time. We want our partner to remain the same person we fell for, and we want ourselves to remain the version of us that felt most alive in love's glow. But both desires are impossible. People grow older, their priorities change, and their personality evolves. Life brings shifts in health, work, family, and circumstances. To resist these changes is to resist reality itself, and disappointment is the inevitable result of that resistance. Some people faced with this reality try to force permanence by controlling or clinging. They attempt to keep their partner from changing, or they deny their own growth to preserve the relationship as it once was. But this strategy rarely works. It suffocates both people, leaving them feeling trapped, rather than connected. The irony is that love, when forced to stay the same, often withers, while love that is allowed to adapt and evolve has a chance to endure. Disappointment comes not from change itself, but from the refusal to accept it. The educational lesson here is that impermanence is not the enemy of love, but part of its nature. By understanding this, we can shift our perspective. Instead of demanding that love stay the same forever, we can learn to appreciate the different stages it passes through. The thrill of early passion, the comfort of companionship, the depth of shared struggles, and even the bittersweetness of letting go. Each phase has its own value. If we cling only to the first stage, we blind ourselves to the richness of what follows. This does not mean love cannot last a lifetime. It can, but only if both people accept that it will not look the same throughout that lifetime. A couple together for decades will experience countless transformations. What held them together in their 20s may not be the same thing that binds them in their 50s. What once was fueled by passion may later be sustained by loyalty, respect, and shared history. Permanence exists not in unchanging feelings, but in the commitment to grow together through change. Disappointment arises when we confuse permanence with stasis, when we demand that love defy the laws of time. The wiser approach is to embrace impermanence as a teacher. It reminds us to cherish the present moment, knowing it will not last forever. It teaches us gratitude for what love gives us, instead of resentment for what it cannot maintain, and it pushes us to grow, both as individuals and as partners, rather than remaining trapped in the illusion of eternal sameness. In the end, romantic love disappoints only when we expect it to be something it was never designed to be: timeless, flawless, and unchanging. When we accept its impermanence, we discover a deeper beauty. Love is not diminished by change, it is made meaningful by it. Just as a flower is precious because it will eventually wither, love is precious because it evolves, transforms, and sometimes fades. To love wisely is not to cling to permanence, but to honor each stage of love as it comes, knowing that its value lies not in how long it lasts, unchanged, but in the depth of experience it brings while it is here. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on the journey we have taken together, it becomes clear that the disappointment we so often associate with romantic love is not because love itself is flawed, but because of the way we approach it. We fall in love with projections rather than reality, and when those projections fade, we feel let down. We carry unrealistic expectations, demanding that one person fulfill all our needs, and when they cannot, we think something is missing. We mistake the natural fading of desire for the death of love, not realizing that it is simply an evolution into something deeper, and we cling to the illusion of permanence, forgetting that everything in life is subject to change. The truth is that romantic love was never meant to be a fairy tale that saves us from ourselves. It was never meant to be flawless, unchanging, or eternal in the way we imagine. It is instead a deeply human experience, messy, imperfect, and fleeting at times, but also full of opportunities for growth, connection, and self-discovery. The disappointment comes not from love itself, but from the illusions we attach to it. If we are willing to let go of those illusions, a new kind of love becomes possible. A love that sees the other person clearly, without projection. A love that does not demand perfection, but values presence. A love that accepts change as part of the journey, rather than resisting it. This is a love that may not match the fantasies we were sold, but it offers something far more meaningful: authenticity, acceptance, and the chance to grow alongside another human being. So why does romantic love always end in disappointment? Because we expect it to be something it is not. But when we release those expectations and embrace love for what it truly is, disappointment turns into understanding, and illusion gives way to wisdom. And in that wisdom, we discover that love's greatest gift is not eternal bliss, but the lessons it teaches us about ourselves, about impermanence, and about the true nature of human connection.